Hello and welcome to this video on changing family patterns, step families, ethnic differences and extended families. Starting with step families account for over 10% of all families with dependent children in the United Kingdom today. On average, 86% of step families has a child from the woman's previous relationship, 11% from the man's, and 3% from both. So we're thinking about where have the children come from, which parent have they come with. Generally speaking, they're coming with mum, and that completely fits what we've looked at before. Ferry and Smith found that step families are similar to first families in all major respects, except they tend to be at a greater risk of poverty. We often find when step families come together, mum may previously have been living in poverty or relying upon state benefits, being a single parent. And of course, we're making an assumption there that the children have come with mum because they generally do. In terms of dad or the new dad, it may well be that they've lived alone. And so in terms of what they've actually been earning has been less because all they've needed to do is provide for themselves. And so that money may now be ever so slightly stretched. Allen and Crow found, or rather argued, that there can be problems regarding divided loyalties in contact with the non-resident parents. So again, if we assume in our hypothetical scenario, children have gone with mum and mum's met a new partner and they've got married, or at least they've settled with the kids, the previous partner, the previous father, the biological father of the children, there may be some issues with regards to him accessing his children, seeing them, spending time with them, perhaps them visiting him, that sort of thing. Also, the children may feel that their loyalties are divided because on one hand, obviously, they live with their mum, but they may miss their father. And so that can be very difficult. Ribbons, McCarthy and others argued that there is no model for the step family. Instead, we should refer to stepfamilies. So unlike, say, a nuclear family, which has been with us for a long time, it's highly structured, highly organised, and everyone knows the roles that they perform, in a step family, that's not really the case because they're a fairly kind of new invention or a new addition to our family diversity within society today. And so the models are still kind of being worked out. So instead of the step family, perhaps we should talk about stepfamilies. Tensions that do exist are not too dissimilar, however, Ribbons, McCarthy and others found, to those first families which are still intact. So yes, okay, you may get divided loyalties, but to an extent divided loyalties already exist within many families or first families that are still intact. So children may sometimes feel that they connect more with one parent more than the other, or they may feel that they're being pulled in different directions by the desires or needs of parents or the wants of parents. And so that's actually quite similar between both first families and step families. In terms of patterns in step families and their reasons, well, have we seen a rise in the number of step families? It would appear so, yes. The increase in the number of single parents, both via divorce and separation, increases opportunities for new step families. By virtue of the fact that a step family can only exist once a first family is broken up, you need more first families breaking up in order to create step families, and that has been happening, so that's why we're seeing more of them. Children are more likely to remain with the mother, this we already know, hence higher percentage of children in step families from women's previous relationships. In terms of why there might be a risk of poverty, well, we've already discussed this. Fathers may have to pay maintenance of children from previous relationships. So when they enter into new relationships, they've already got a bit of a drain, as it were, leaving their bank account, going into the bank account of their previous mother and providing for those children. So they're perhaps a little bit squeezed there. Also, we know women generally earn less in society, even now. So there's still some work that needs to be done there. So by virtue of that, they may be relying upon state benefits before they get married. And so you may find that these types of families are more likely to live in poverty. There are also tensions due to lack of norms with regards to how to act within these types of families. So again, these types of families are fairly new, the models aren't quite there yet, and so the norms are still being worked out. It may well be in 50 to 100 years' time, this is no longer the case. The UK is now a multicultural society. It's a very diverse society. Lots of different types of people from different parts of the world have now come and settled in the UK and will continue to do so. And so that brings about ethnic differences in families. Immigration into the UK since the 1950s has increased ethnic diversity. In the 2011 census, the last census, 86% of the population in the UK were white, whilst 14% were black, Asian and minority ethnic. Ethnic diversity has led to more family diversity. Lots of different family types are now in abundance in the UK today. Starting off with black families, we tend to find that there is a higher proportion of lone parent families in Britain's black community. Just over half of families with dependent families are lone parent headed in this community, primarily headed by mothers. It has been argued that perhaps this is a product of slavery, that in the past, when the black indigenous populations of Africa and the Caribbean were enslaved, this was an immensely disruptive experience for that community, for that group of people. And this was, of course, primarily instigated by the white communities or the white peoples of Europe. And of course, the UK is part of that. And so we often found that families were split up, that mum, dad, if they were married in those previous communities with children, were split up, and that the children would go with mum. And so that disruption may still be filtering down even hundreds of years later, and maybe influencing culture within Britain's black communities today, or the black communities in the West generally. Mercer found that black women tend to value independence, and this absolutely could be tied to the fact that many girls, maybe growing up in single mother households, looking up to their mum, thinking, well, that's a strong, powerful role model, I want to emulate that. Independence is clearly something that's very important, and they may go on to emulate that as a result. Reynolds, however, argued that stats are quite misleading in this area, and that actually many are in stable, non-cohabiting relationships. So it may well be that the parents are living apart together, so they are together, and they have had children together, but the children live with mum and dad aren't living together. So perhaps we need to dig down a little bit deeper to see what's really going on in the statistics. Looking now at Asian families in the United Kingdom, we see something slightly different. So Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Indian households tend to be larger, 4.4 persons per household to 2.4 in black and white households. Sometimes these families are extended with 3 generations living under one roof, but actually for the most part they tend to be quite nuclear in nature. So in fact this could be seen as quite a modernist thing. Asian culture invariably values family and sees family as very important. There's often lots of deference for elders or elderly members of the family. Ballard in 1982 found that large families provide support with migration. So it could be that when groups of people or families are migrating, say, to the UK, they don't all come over in one large group. They may come over in several waves. And actually having a large extended family helps to deal with the rigours and the difficulties of that transition, of that movement from one place to another. More recently, families have actually shrunk in our Asian community in the UK, but still live relatively close to each other. So again, they may be living in nuclear families and the kind of network within a very similar geographical area rather than all living in one large household. So we're seeing change even in this particular group. Looking at the extended family today, Charles argued that 3-generation families all living under one roof is more or less extinct in the contemporary postmodern world. That generally speaking, we're seeing new family types take over, and that this is one that's slowly but surely disappearing. Wilmot argued that the extended family today may still exist, but rather as a dispersed extended family. That is, separated geographically, but maintaining strong links with each other. So lots of maybe nuclear families living in a sort of dispersed geographical area, regularly seeing each other, regularly connecting with each other. And Chamberlain echoed this, talking about multiple nuclear families in black Caribbean communities in the UK, for example, where they act like a network. So we see some similarity there. Bell said that working class and the middle class both have kinship networks. So for the working class, generally, there's frequent contact and domestic help between mothers and daughters. It's kind of a sort of feminine aspect of the way families operate. In the middle classes, generally, there's more of a financial aspect to this, and in particular between fathers and sons. So perhaps it takes on a more masculine element, with fathers perhaps loaning or lending money to their sons. One family type that's becoming increasingly more prevalent in the UK is the beanpole family, first really identified by Brannan, 2003. This is a family which is extended through 3 generations, usually a grandparent, a parent and a child. They will not be extended horizontally, however, so we're not going to have aunts and uncles and cousins involved. And so this is really the result of 2 major demographic changes in the UK. Firstly, increased life expectancy, people are living longer, so grandparents are around more, and smaller family sizes. So if we have more lone parent families, in particular single parent families, it may not be unusual to have a grandmother, a mother and a daughter all living together in a beanpole family, a long, thin family. Despite the rise of beanpoles, many still feel obligated to their extended family or kin. Finch and Mason found that 90% of people had given or received financial help from or cared for a sick relative. Chill found that actually more was expected of female family members than male family members, and this is often because caring for a sick relative, for example, may be considered part of the female gender domain, that it's a woman's job, that it's something that women do. Whereas lending money may be seen as more part of the male gender domain, something that men do. So perhaps it's a granddad or a father putting his hand in his pocket to lend money to a male relative. Furthermore, Mason found that not all will participate to the same extent when it comes to these obligations to relatives or extended family members. It depends on the obligation women feel towards those relatives. And we often find that people are very good at coming up with legitimate excuses for not engaging, and in particular men tend to be better at doing this. And so perhaps this is why we tend to find that women are more likely to be engaged with things like looking after ill family members. Overall, the extended family still plays an important role in society, perhaps just a diminished role, but not to the same extent as Parsons' classic extended family, as we discussed previously when looking at theories of the family back in the 1800s. That's it. Thank you very much.